Hello, my name is Kai, and today we're going to be talking about Liverpool's academy. More specifically, we're going to be talking about what players should Liverpool look to give minutes to or even potentially loan out from the under-21s. The reason I'm not looking at the under-18s in this video is because development and progression is not linear, and looking at some of these really young players is probably not the best idea, especially if it puts unnecessary pressure on them. But for the under-21s, we should be looking to see who could make strides into the first team. But before I get into it, it'd be great if you guys could like the video, subscribe, comment down below, and follow me on Twitter. But let's just get right into the analysis. Okay, so the general structure of this video is going to be me showing you a bunch of panels of players in only the under-21s games from this season, and then we're going to look at the pitch and see how that would translate to our team now. So we're going to start here with Trey and Yoni. So let's look at the first panel. So in this example, we're going to see Trey drive up the field. This is one of the things that he's very good at. Something that I should clarify in this video is that we're only going to be looking at a few actions of a player. This is across the entire under-21 season that I'm looking at. But we're only going to be looking at specific examples of an action. Like for example, Trey and Yoni could have done multiple driving actions throughout the season, dribbling from defense to attack. But we're only going to look at one of them because I'm just trying to illustrate the attributes that these players have. So in this situation, we have Trey on the ball, and he's going to try to drive forward. Continues to drive forward. Okay, but what we know about Trey is that he's not just going to keep dribbling into traffic. What he's going to do is see, oh, okay, I can't keep dribbling past these players unless I go wide on the outside. Instead, what I'm going to do is, from this position, thread the ball in behind for Renell Young, which is exactly what he does. And the ball ends up getting received by Renell Young, who doesn't end up scoring. Let's look at another panel of Trey. This time, Trey is driving once again. He doesn't just keep driving forever. He tries to thread in a pass and gets to Trent Kone. So what we know about Trey is that he's a good dribbler, and he can release passes at the right time. That's good. Let's keep going. This time, Trey, instead of being in a counterattack, is in much more settled play. He's got the entire low block defense of Brighton right in front of him. What does he do? He still is able to find the open runner, which I believe is James McConnell, and is able to thread him through. The ball goes through, and he ends up receiving it. So even in settled play, Trey is able to pass in behind. It's interesting because when Trey came to the team, I thought he was going to be more of a 10, but he's kind of showed that he can do sort of the 8 role, the 10 role, or even a deep progression role from the 6 position. He's not really your orthodox 6, but I could see him developing into a deep lying playmaker type, sort of like Enzo Fernandez. Now, Trey also does well defensively. So here's an example of one of the Middlesbrough players having the ball. Shows a bit too much to Trey. He anticipates and he takes over and he gets the ball. Here's an example of Trey in settled play. This time he's crossing with his weaker left foot. The ball comes in and the header is squandered. But what you can see is that Trey is capable of delivering these crosses from the edge of the box. Now, when I'm showing each of these panels, what you should take into account is that they do this. Like if I'm showing you a panel of this, it means that he's done something similar to this multiple times throughout the season. This isn't just a one-off for him. So that bodes really well for someone like him to translate into the first team. So here's an example of Trey now in a much more forward position, because I said he could be a 6, an 8, or a 10. So here's Trey as the 10. He's even wearing the number 10. So this time Trey drives inside. He looks as if he's going to shoot on his right foot. He cuts inside and takes a shot with his left. So what you can see from this is Trey is also effective in the box as a goal scorer and is able to dribble forward and shoot. I remember people used to give like the Jamal Musiala comparisons. I kind of do see it because he can kind of shift from one way to the other and is a good dribbler, but he's much more of a complete midfielder than somebody like Musiala, who's much more of just an attacker / wide forward. So that's even a potentially a second striker. But that's Trey and Yoni. So now let's look at the pitch. This is just our best 11 as of right now. And let's bring in Trey and Yoni for Dom, first of all. So what we know is that if Trey's in the box here and you give him the ball, he can drag defenders in close to him. He can fake one way, drag more people in, and then if there's a forward here, there's a chance that he passes it, or he can shoot from very tight angles and potentially score goals. That's one way we could use him. We also know that Trey could play either of these positions. If you're playing him in Ryan's role, he's going to pick the ball up off someone like Allison, drive forward a bit, and then find a pass to somebody like Flo, potentially find a pass to someone like Mo if he drags towards this direction. And if you play him in McAllister's role instead, he'll be much more of just a carrier forward and will have more freedom to drive towards the box and then find somebody in the final third. So you can play him in all of the midfield roles. I think his best ones is probably Mac's role. I think it's still risky to have someone who carries as your 6, which is why I still have the problems with Grav being there. Trey is much more similar to that. Now, he could develop more of a passing game, and we are sort of seeing that, but I think he still is like a carry first midfielder. So let's move on to the next player, which is going to be Cornell Miskier. So there's not much to analyze about a goalkeeper. Cornell Miskier, what I know about him is that he's very good at stopping shots from outside the box, even ones that are higher up in the air. He's a very good shot stopper. And what you always look for in goalkeepers is how they parry the ball away. Do they parry it back into danger? Do they parry it towards their center backs? Do they parry it away and out of play? Do they parry it for a throw-in? Cornell Miskier pretty consistently parries the ball away from goal. Sometimes it does spill to somebody who's on that side, like an attacker, and they cross it back in and have a chance to shoot, but he does a very good job at parrying it away from danger as much as possible, which is good for a young goalkeeper, and Liverpool's ability to make good young goalkeepers is one of our biggest strengths, and it'll be interesting to see how that continues to develop now that Taffarel is gone and we're replacing him with Xavi Valero. So here's another example. This time, instead of a save where he can see the ball and it's a difficult shot to stop, but he can see it all the way through, here's more of a reaction save. This is against Sunderland. The ball comes in. It looks as if it's going to be impossible to save it, and Miskier is able to save the ball off the line. So he's got good reactions, can read the game pretty well. It's difficult to see his distribution because of how poorly the under-21s played last season, but in terms of shot stopping, I think he's a solid goalkeeper and could definitely be 4th choice if we need him to be. It remains to be seen how someone like Armin Pesci is going to react in this setup as well. And there's no point in really analyzing Cornell Miskier on the pitch. So now we have Trent Kone Doherty, which a lot of people have talked about. He was in the front 3 back in the day with Lewis Kumas and Jaden Dans. He's now in the new front 3, which has seen a lot of different changes, whether you have Morrison in there, whether you have Renell Young in there, maybe Tommy Pilling is pushed up further. There are a lot of different variations this season with the front 3, maybe Kroll Figueroa. So this is the only example that we're using of Trent Kone Doherty. The reason is Trent Kone Doherty, TKD, he can play on the left or the right. He's a very good dribbler and ball carrier. His passing in the final third's pretty simple. He just picks out whoever he can. But the thing is, I don't think he's a particularly good finisher. I'd actually say that he's a pretty bad finisher. Now, he's young, but I do worry about it because he gets a lot of shots. He has a high shot volume, but his finishing, he shoots directly at the goalkeeper, or he misses, or he attempts to shoot from bad angles. This is something I want to see him develop, and I'd actually suggest we maybe loan somebody like him, because for someone like Trey, I guess I should have been giving my verdicts this whole time. I would keep someone like Trey within the first team group to see if he can develop. Cornell Miskier should stay at academy level for now to keep developing his shot stopping, but Trent Kone Doherty, I would loan out because I want to see if he can fill in physically, but I also want to see if he can develop his finishing a bit more. So in this example, we can see that he dribbles. He keeps dribbling, and he goes, and he goes, and he's just dragging people, and they're just unable to stop him. This entire time, they're unable to stop him. He just freely dribbles through. He's very quick. He's very shifty. He's hard to push off the ball. Good player. Very, very good dribbler. I think it would be difficult to see this scale to men's professional football because he's not strong enough to really push off much more dominant players, and his finishing's not great enough. His link up is decent, but it's not like he's an elite passer or playmaker. I want to see more from Trent Kone Doherty. But if we go to the pitch, if I bring in somebody like TKD, he could play on the left or he could play on the right, and what he's going to do is size up his fullback and go on the left or on the right. He'll go on the right and he can cross into the byline. He can go onto the left and attempt to shoot. It's much better on this side for him to shoot because he can cut inside and shoot with his right. Here, he struggles a bit more with the shooting but could potentially pass across goal. But again, he's not really an elite finisher. So I would suggest loaning out someone like Trent Kone Doherty. So now let's look at Renell Young. I really like Renell Young. I think he's very versatile. You could play him on the left, on the right, as a 10 or as a striker. He's also not really a particularly good finisher. I think our academy is really struggling to find particularly good finishers, but Renell Young is one of the players who's a forward in our academy. So here's an example of him dribbling, kind of beats his man, goes into space. I wouldn't say Renell Young is particularly fast. He's got a decent burst of pace, but he's not someone who has a really high top speed and is going to just run into space and immediately go direct to goal and shoot. But he is very good at kind of jinking one way or the other, sizing up his defender, and then he's pretty good at not just keeping his head down and just being able to find the free man, which in this case is Rio Camacho. He's another example of him just making intelligent runs. He makes very intelligent runs, which allow midfielders to pass in behind and go very direct. Now, he's not a good enough finisher to settle down and shoot consistently, but here's an example of him just going direct to goal, shooting, and scoring. He's able to bring the ball down, get it right in front of him, and shoot right past the goalkeeper. Doesn't do this consistently, but what it does show is good movement, which you always want to see from a forward, and a decent technical base, because he was able to bring the ball down. But his finishing remains to be seen. It's not as bad as someone like TKD, but it's not particularly good. So here's another panel where we're going to see another great finish from Renell Young, but it's less about the finish and more about the movement. He goes across, plants his foot, and he slots it right past the goalkeeper across goal. It's good ideas in terms of his finishing. It's just that it's not consistent. He tries to go across goal, or he tries to go high into the top right-hand corner when he's shooting, near post. It's just that maybe he just needs more minutes, and maybe it would be useful to loan someone like him out, but he might also just benefit from another year in the academy to sort of develop this finishing, because to me, he's not really a true striker. I think he's building his way into becoming a striker because we sort of need one at under 21 level, but I think he would be much more suited to be a left or a right winger. But in playing as a striker, I think he is developing those instincts, which for me indicates that he's a very intelligent footballer, and that's probably why Arne has even had him as a bench option in some games, because he does seem to be able to make intelligent runs and decisions. It's just the finishing that needs work. He's even a good dribbler. I mean, this is him out on the wing, sizing up his fullback and just straight up breezing right past him. That shows me that he's a decent dribbler. Of course, he's got a good burst of pace, so he's got some good explosiveness, so he was able to get by and win a foul. Renell Young's a good dribbler. He really just goes direct when he's on that left wing, just breezing past players, getting to the left-hand side, cutting and shooting. And this is another example where he just drags the ball wide. And of course, he's shooting from a difficult angle. He could go for a cutback, but the cutback's not the easiest. If you were to try to pass here, this is a very difficult pass, and it's really hard to pass like this. Let's bring in Renell Young. So I think for Liverpool, you could play him in these three positions. I think on the right, he would struggle a bit more, but he could easily play as sort of a left 10. I do kind of see him more as like a 10 or maybe a 9.5. So he would be pretty good in Wirtz's role. I think you could play him against a lot of oppositions, and he could potentially dribble across and win a foul on the outside late into a game. You could play him as a striker because he has the ability to drop in and link up play. He's pretty intelligent in that way. You could even play the 10 role of sort of doing that late into the game. Obviously, he can't start here because of the defensive responsibilities, but you could bring him on late into a game and he could do the sort of link up play work that our 10 does. But yeah, you could realistically play him in any of these three positions, and he could do it to a decent level. For someone like Renell Young, I would suggest loaning him out or keeping him with the under 21s, calling him up occasionally to be on the bench for the first team. So now let's look at Rio. Now, when I look at some of the under 18s games, maybe in a future video, you'll see a lot more content of Rio. And of course, you've seen the Preston game, so I'm not going to show any things like that. We're mainly just looking at what I liked from the under 21s. And I think he's probably the best finisher I've seen in the under 21s this season, because Rio is obviously a good dribbler. He just fully sends his fullback and just creates space every time he dribbles. And he can finish with both feet. This is him finishing with his left foot. Again, across goal, which is very intelligent, into the bottom right-hand corner. This is his first goal for the under 21s. And in the same game, game, he got his second goal. This time, a pass got in behind, and he was able to finesse it with his right foot. Again, a cross goal into the bottom right-hand corner. Two-footed, he's able to create separation by dribbling, by runs in behind, very intelligent runs, and he can shoot with his left or his right. Now, the issue I have with Rio is he keeps his head down a lot, so he doesn't see a lot of the passes that he should. So sometimes he dribbles for too long, he dribbles into traffic, he takes shots from bad angles, or he takes shots where they're just immediately going to get blocked. So that is a problem, but he's only 17 years old. That sort of awareness will develop with time. He's definitely one of the most athletic players in the under-21s, and he's a very good finisher in my opinion. So I would like to see someone like Rio hang around the first team, see if he can develop more physically and sort of develop that finishing by playing with some better players. Now, if we actually look at the pitch again, we can see how Rio would fit. Now, you can't really play him on the right wing. I mean, he would still destroy his fullback, but I don't really know if Rio can cut inside with his left and shoot. I think with his left foot, he's more used to just going across goal. I don't know if he can do the cut inside thing. I just haven't seen it. But you could easily play him on the left, where he would just size up his fullback in like the last 10 minutes of a game, cook him, go into the byline, shoot with his right, shoot with his left across goal, and he would just be a nuisance to bring on. It would effectively be how Doak is, but with potentially more end product and a bit more strength about him that Ben Doak has. Because Ben Doak is good hold-up play, but I sort of feel like Rio's more of like a true athlete than Ben is. So let's talk about Kroll Figueroa. Now, we're not going to be able to see what he did for the United States, but the thing I like about Kroll Figueroa is, although he's not a good finisher, his link-up's decent but not incredible, I think he is one of the best pressers in the under-21s. So here's one example of him pressing. He sees the loose pass, he runs onto the ball, immediately puts the defender under pressure, wins it, and then this is the Rio goal that we saw earlier. He links up play by back-heeling it into Rio. This is a very difficult skill to execute, but the awareness is incredible. The awareness to press in the first place, and then the awareness to hold up the ball and backheel it, not be selfish. It's very good by Figueroa. I think he is a generally pretty selfless player, but I do like his work rate and his passing. Now, would someone like Figueroa make it at Liverpool? Probably not. But if you wanted to keep him in the under-21s and call him up for cup games, I wouldn't see the problem with it. Here's another example of him pressing. This was against West Ham, where the referee didn't award the goal that came from the pressing that he did. Presses onto the goalkeeper, the ball goes into the back of the net, but the referee doesn't call it because it goes in and then bounces off the post because it sort of like has this backspin on it and then comes out. Again, he's a very good presser. So someone like him would definitely be useful to have around in certain games. You could play him as a striker or a winger, but ultimately you should probably loan him out and see if he can develop a bit more of his all-around game. And there's no real point to show how you would look on the pitch because effectively would just be a presser that you could put anywhere across the front line. So let's look at James McConnell. We've seen a lot of James McConnell already throughout the season, but here's a lot of his games at under 21 level, so you're going to see how much more dominant he is in these sorts of games. And I've not included players like Tyler Morton because I just see them getting sold. So let's look at the first panel with James McConnell. So this is an example of James McConnell in settled play. And what we see here is he's just looking at this Leeds defense in front of him, attempts to dribble, gets past his first man, gets fully passed, keeps cutting from one side to the other, is able to pull himself wide, and then cut the ball back for Renell Young to potentially finish, which he doesn't. Here's another example of McConnell, this time also in settled play. He dribbles right across the defense, and he slots the ball home. So you can see from McConnell, he's a very good dribbler inside of the box, and he can finish in different situations. Let's see McConnell defensively. This time we're going to see him press. Comes out of nowhere, looks to win the ball, gets really close, wins the ball, and it gets picked up by the left back in this case. What this shows is James McConnell is not just someone who's good in possession, but he's also good at pressing out of possession. We can also see him near his own box and how he defends. He anticipates well, he runs in to win the ball, and then he dribbles forward looking to make a pass. This is what James McConnell's good at. He's good at every aspect, from playing as a 6, as an 8, or a 10. He can do the entire role. In his current state, he's probably most suited to be an 8, similar to sort of a box-to-box kind of role, but he could also play as a 6 in a more reserved defensive position, or as a 10 if you needed him to. In fact, he started his career in Sunderland as a 10. Here's an example of James McConnell in possession. This time, we're looking at his passing play. McConnell turns, sizes up the pass, and threads a beautiful ball in for for Jaden Dans, who actually does score from this position. So what you need to know about James McConnell is he's good in possession in terms of dribbling, he can shoot, he can pass, he can defend well. You can see exactly why somebody like Arne would like him and why I think he should stay in and around the first team this season, with the potential of loaning him out if it's a good prospect, maybe, like if it's a good option. I wouldn't loan him out in the first half of the season, but potentially in the second half if he doesn't get enough playtime. But for now, I would keep him in the first team. McConnell could play in these two positions. You could play him in the 10. I don't think we're going to do that because of how stacked we are in these positions, especially with other young players. I think it's more likely for him to be in midfield. I think he'll get a lot more minutes in like the cup games as a 6, but he could potentially be a substitute in the 8 or in the 6 as well. I think that's where we're most likely to use him. There's a world where you could use him as a right back as well, although I don't think it's the best use of him. But yes, I do really like James McConnell, and I can see why Arne likes him too. Let's now look at Kieran Morrison. So Morrison is currently linked with moves away from the club because he's not getting minutes. In fact, Arne Slot's not even calling him up for the games in Asia, like against AC Milan. I think the reason that this is happening is because as good as Kieran Morrison is technically, there's a lot of questions about his game that I have, and I personally think that he should go out on loan to see if he can iron out some of these kinks. So for example, what we know about Kieran Morrison that he does well, he's actually a really underrated passer of the ball. People talk about him being technically good in the box and being able to dribble, but his passing game's incredible. In this case, you see Kieran Morrison driving forward, and he doesn't just dribble into the fullbacks, he threads this ball in between the center back and the fullback. To execute a pass like this into space with this ball is incredible. Absolutely incredible. It's a very hard thing to do. Receives the ball, in this case TKD receives the ball, and I said before Trent Kone isn't really a good finisher yet because a good finisher would dink this. He kind of just shoots flat and it doesn't really go in. Here's another example. Same game, Kieran Morrison passing. Again, just finds the man in open space. Very good at doing that. In this game, he was playing as a false 9 and he was able to drop in and link up play. The issue I see with Kieran Morrison is he plays sort of like Harvey Elliott and has a similar frame. He's not particularly tall, and I think that's going to be his killer. But if he can develop physically, he can go out on loan and become more of a consistent, ever-present goal scorer and creator, because he has to become an elite creator with that frame. I think there's a future for him, but I do think he should be loaned out. There's no point in keeping him in the academy. We've kind of already seen him dominate at under 21 level. I think it's time to loan him out and see if he can develop physically, ideally to the championship or League One. Here's another example of him passing. This is just a quick pass. He receives the ball from the center back, in this case Pennington, immediately flicks the ball out to Trent Kone, who's able to counterattack. So he can do it. He can pass in transition. He can pass early on in build-up and later in build-up. But let's see what he does on the ball when he's dribbling. Well, in this situation, he's very good at cutting inside and shooting. So he sizes up his defender, sends him by cutting inside, and in this narrow gap, he's easily able to slot it home. So Kieran Morrison is able to do this sort of finishing. He's not an elite finisher, but he has a couple of finishes on him. There are certain situations where you kind of know he's going to score. For example, here's another situation where he's sort of central, because ideally Kieran Morrison's a 10, but you could play him as a right winger or as a false 9 if you needed to. I think at professional level, he can only really play as a 10 or a right winger, and I don't think his pace is enough to be a forward on the right. He would be more so a playmaker on the right. He's good at crossing on his left foot and even his right foot, but you would also maybe want him as a 10 who could link up play. So Morrison drives forward, he's a good dribbler, we know this, and he takes a shot which barely hits the post. But again, he's very good at kind of creating separation, dribbling through players, and getting a shot off. Here's an example of him going on the outside to score. Sizes up his defender, goes on the outside, and shoots across goal, and he scores. He's also good at this type of finish, sort of just going across the goalkeeper with his right foot and shooting. Again, being as two-footed as he is, it's kind of similar to Rio, except we don't see Kieran Morrison get into these goal-scoring positions as often. Sometimes he tries to shoot too early from outside the box, and sometimes he just isn't able to create the separation that's needed because he doesn't really have the pace. Here's more of an example of him outside the box. He sizes up his defender again, this time from the left, cuts inside, shoots, scores. You can sort of see the style of player that he is. He has certain finishes that are good. He's a good dribbler. He can pass well. The issues are always going to be P&P, his physicality and his pace, similar to Elliott. If he develops his in-possession game enough, he will be good enough for Liverpool. If he doesn't, he'll have to be sold, which is why I personally think you loan him out, see if he can cope at that higher level, and if not, look to either keep him around as a squad player for the short term or just sell him immediately for some pure profit. And if we go ahead and look at the pitch now, we can think about where Kieran Morrison would play based on what I've said. You could play him on the right, you could play him as a 10. He can't really play as a striker in professional football, but either of these two positions doesn't make sense as a Salah understudy, potentially. It's just that he wouldn't get a massive amount of minutes. Could he play the 10? No, I think we have too many players who are already going to play there. So realistically, if we keep him around, he's a Salah backup. I don't think we will keep him around though. I think he's either going to get sold or move on this summer or get loaned out. That's my personal opinion. Okay, so now let's move on to Carter Pennington. So Liverpool's defenders are really hard to analyze because I don't think any of them are particularly good at defending, barring Welity Lucky, and it's hard to even find clips of Welity Lucky where it's elite defending, but we can talk about Pennington. So Pennington's been used as a center back, sometimes as a right back. What I will say is he's good at in possession, and it's not like he's good at these long diags. He's sort of good at these threaded balls where he just finds the man in space. And there are more examples of him being good in possession than just this. It's just one example of what he does. So he's just good at these flat passes to the fullback, to the midfielder, to the players dropping in from the attack. He's just sort of good at that kind of ball playing. He's also a decent box defender because he's pretty tall. I can't really tell how tall he is. I think maybe at least 6'4". Just a good box defender, heads the ball away. This is what he's kind of good at. But I think all of our center backs effectively get rinsed in transition, which I do worry about because I don't really see a way to make it into an Arne slot team if you do get rinsed in transition. I think Amaranalo gets caught out in possession more than the others. I think the best one for a slot team right now is Welity Lucky in terms of someone who can just come right into the team. I think realistically you loan out someone like Amaranalo, which we'll see in a moment, and you keep someone like Pennington around in the under 21s for another season, similar with Lucky. Speaking of, let's get into Amaranalo. I'll look into all three of the center backs at the end as opposed to looking at them right now, because it'll make sense when we actually look at the depth of all of the center backs that we have. So to start off, we have the first clip of Amaranalo. This is just a case of him anticipating well. I think when he's on the front foot trying to press onto a player, he's pretty good at that role and winning the ball. It's sort of when players are running towards him that he struggles. Here's an example of Nalo in possession. Like Pennington, he can do these short passes, but what he can also do is block the ball, win it back, and fire off a great long diagonal ball that someone can pick up at the halfway line or past the halfway line. This is pretty good because it's difficult to be a defender who's good in possession, and I think both of our defenders are really good footballers, both of our two center backs at under 21 levels. I'm talking about Nalo and Pennington here. Obviously, I'm not talking about Lucky yet. Their actual defending is the problem, which is why I think you would loan out someone like Nalo so that he can make mistakes at professional level and sort of learn the anticipation from better older center backs so that he can actually develop that part of his game. I would give Nalo sort of the Kwanzaa treatment. You send him on a loan to League 1 or League 2 and see if he can develop. Pennington, I maybe keep around for one more year before doing the same thing. And for Lucky, keep him around in the under 21s, but also give him some senior minutes. Now, I don't have any footage for Welity Lucky, mainly because it's kind of difficult to find footage of him defending well. It's sort of just his positioning that's good. But for someone like Pennington, he could play either of these two positions. Realistically, he can't really do or high up the pitch role of a Frimpong or a Bradley. So he'd just effectively be in Konate's position. Nalo would effectively just become cover for Van Dijk. And Lucky could play either of these two positions, but he's more suited for the Konate role. Realistically, Pennington's good in possession. You could use him in some cup games, but probably would just be relegated to the academy this season. Nalo, we've seen him against in the PSV game. I think he just is too error prone at this stage. I think you loan him out for now and you reassess next season. I think Lucky can easily be your fifth choice center back, with Endo potentially becoming your fifth choice if Lucky isn't good enough, because we haven't seen him play at senior level yet. But I think for now he could be your fifth choice. Get someone like Gahey alongside someone like Joe Gomez and it would be fine. The second to last player that we're going to look at is Tommy Pilling. Now, I have a lot of clips assembled of Tommy Pilling. And the reason is because I don't think a lot of people know who he is. I don't think a lot of people have seen him play. He turns 21 this year, which puts him in sort of the older bracket of some of the academy players. And there's a chance that he doesn't get his chance. But what I will say is that I like how versatile he is. He's similar to Luca Stevenson in terms of being versatile. And he can play left back. You can play him as a winger. You can play him in midfield. You can play him everywhere. He's a very intelligent footballer. So here's one example of him. This is him just passing as you normally would. And he's lining up just sort of a straight pass after receiving the ball. And he just passes into space. But the pace in which he did this, the quickness, is something that could translate to the Prem. Because he releases the ball quick enough that even if there were a lot of players around him in the Prem, where there's less space and more people immediately pressing you, I think that immediately translates to his quickness of passing. Here's an example of Tommy Pilling's ability to dribble and create space for himself. He's shielding the ball despite his frame, gets on the outside of the defender, and is able to cut the ball back for Renell Young. Also directly translatable to the Prem. He's holding off his defender, right, by just shielding. The defender's not really physically pushing onto him, he's just shielding, and he's able to lay the ball off to a striker. This is something that would also translate to a higher level, and I can see why Slot uses him in these sort of condensed pitch games that we see in training, because it looks like Pilling is a very good technical footballer, and he's very intelligent and makes good decisions, and I can imagine him being good in a 5-a-side or 8-a-side game. So here's a whole sequence of Pilling. So he's out here on the wing. He gets the ball into the player who's the left back, that's Lee Jonas. He continues the run where after passing, he's looking to receive the ball again. So he runs into space because he could potentially cross it or shoot. He does receive the ball. He drives into the byline, keeps driving, but he's not particularly fast. So this defender is able to come across, he can come inside, and now he's going to struggle. But what he does here is incredible. He shields the ball again, and he does a turn to create separation where all of these defenders are on this side of him. He's on this side of the ball, and he attempts to shoot, and he just drags it slightly wide. And with a little bit of coaching, he could learn how to cut it across for one of these players who's on-rushing to tap it in. For me, that's the makings of a very intelligent footballer. Some people might be concerned that he's blossoming late, but again, progression isn't linear. Some of these players are just going to suddenly break through and develop into much better players, and when surrounded by better players in training, you might see the development happen quicker. If you even look at Barcelona, it took until Marc Casado was 20, the same age as Pilling, to sort of take off in that team. Here's an example of Pilling defensively. He's good at anticipating. He anticipates a pass and he just intercepts. I love midfielders who anticipate interceptions rather than just tackles, because what that tells me is that they're reading the intentions of these players. They're not just going for where the ball is. They're thinking about, where's this player going to pass? I'm going to cut off this lane, and if they do attempt the pass, I'll be there to intercept. I like that. It shows a good reading of the game. So here's an example of Pilling in possession. He's able to drive forward, and he plays this incredible long ball to Rio Camacho, which before we've seen him sort of passing flat, doing these little cute little combinations, turning, dribbling. His long passing's also incredible, and when he's played as a left back, I've seen that ability to complete these really great long passes, and that's another thing that's just outrageous that he has in his locker, and it could translate well. Now, you could look to loan out someone like Pilling, but I would honestly think it might be beneficial to keep him around. I know it could hurt his development, but I kind of just want to see Slot maybe give him similar praise to somebody like McConnell, because I do think he could warrant it. Like the technique that he demonstrates to get passes like this off to Kieran Morrison, to pass the ball high up into the air and complete it like that is just a very difficult skill to do. And I really do like technical footballers who are pass first, like Pilling is. Like, look at this. He's here, right? The fullback is on rushing, which is James Norris, passes him the ball, and he immediately looks to lay it off. Gets the ball, immediately lays it off into space, and now there's a counterattack where he could rush in. Norris could go to the byline and cross. He could pass it early. So many options because of what he did and how quickly he reacts. Just the pace in which he just immediately passes the ball off, doesn't hang on to it, is just very translatable to the Prem. So here's an example of Pilling on the edge of the box. Here's the last sequence of play that we're looking at from him. He gets the ball and immediately sends the first defender. He comes inside with a bunch of defenders on him, takes his first shot, which is blocked by the defender, latches onto the ball, and now tries to go on the outside since he couldn't go on the inside. Gets on the outside, keeps dribbling, is now faced up by another center back, gets on the outside again, rides the tackle, shoots, and scores. I mean, yes, this isn't a very repeatable action, but the reason I'm showing this is because his progression and his ability to dribble, he could do it in the box, he can hold up the ball, he's scrappy, I think people describe him as a very diminutive midfielder, but he can pass, he can dribble, he can control the game, he can play multiple different positions. And if we go to the pitch, let's just briefly talk about Pilling. You could play him in either fullback position. I think you could do the driving role. I think you could play him as an 8. I think you'd struggle to play him as a 6 because I don't think he's physical enough, but maybe against weaker opposition or towards the end of a game. And you could play him as a 10. I don't think you can really play him as a winger at senior level because I don't think he's good enough in possession to be like a Verts type playmaker, and he's not fast enough to be like a Rio, someone who can beat his man on the outside. But I definitely utilize him as a utility player, similar to how you would utilize someone like Lucas Stevenson. Before I get to the last player, I'm going to talk about 3 players that I haven't mentioned, which is Isaac Mabia, Josh Davidson, and Laffy. Laffy is a midfielder. I do like a lot of what I see from him. I want to see him continue to play at under 21 level. He's only 19. I think he's a good passer, and he's got a lot of good awareness, and he can progress the ball well by just dribbling and carrying, but I haven't seen enough of him in the under 21s games. I'll have to look at some more under 18s games, potentially even from last season, because I do want to see what he could develop into. Isaac Mabia is a good athlete. I think he could do the Frimpong role. If you wanted to keep him around, he could definitely be third choice behind the likes of Connor Bradley and Frimpong, but ideally I think you loan him out to see if he can take the next step or if you should look to sell him. And Josh Davidson, I like that he can play both fullback positions. It would maybe be beneficial to keep him around in the under 21s just in case there are major injuries here, but ideally I think you also look to loan him out. But then again, you can't loan out all of your players from the under 21s, so I think he'll likely be kept around in the under 21s. So the last player that we're going to look at is none other than Kyle Kelly. There's not much to look at. I don't think he'll be in Liverpool's long-term plans. I think you could just loan him out, similar to like a James Balagizi, with the intention of selling him a little bit later for a small fee. But I do like how technical he is. I think that he's a very good passer and he controls the game well, and he's an international for St. Kitts and Nevis. But the awareness to play a pass like this is not easy because a lot of midfielders would think to make this pass or this pass. He instead goes here on the outside, which yes, takes people away from goal, but it also fully negates this defender. He's just fully out of the picture. He's on the other side now, and if another player were to onrush a little quicker, you get a good cross and a guaranteed goal. So I think he's a good passer. He's a good controller. He could be a 6 or an 8 for Liverpool, just not at a high enough level, but maybe you loan him out. Maybe you keep him around in the under 21s, but I think he's a good player, and I think he'd be another useful player just to have around in training. He could be utilized as a 6 if you wanted to, as an 8 or as a 10. I think most likely he would be played as an 8, but realistically I think he's going to get loaned out. So the last thing that is left to do is talk about which players I would carry into next season. I'd carry Rio as backup for left wing. I would definitely carry McConnell to be one of the members in the pivot. I would carry Wellity Lucky. I would keep Cornell Misker around. I don't think it's time to loan him out. I think you keep him at academy level. I would keep Pilling around, in my opinion. I think he's a good player to have in our arsenal. I would keep Figueroa around, although it might be useful to loan him out and instead just keep someone like Renell Young around and maybe have Renell Young become more of a mainstay, which he already sort of is, but even more of one at under 21s level. Meanwhile, I think you loan out Trent Kone Doherty, you loan out Kieran Morrison, you probably loan out Figueroa, you loan out Kelly. You keep Laffy around at under 21s level. You keep Inyoni inside of the squad to be the 10 backup or as an 8 backup. You keep Davidson around the under 21s, Pennington around the under 21s. You loan out Amaranalo, probably loan out Isaac Mabia, and you keep Lee Jonas around. I haven't really talked much about him. I think he's a decent defender, but I want to still see more of him at under 21s level and see if he can really cut it because I'm a bit shaky on him in possession and out of possession. I do like him at left back though. I don't really like him when he plays center back. But yeah, this is what I would do. These are the players I'd keep in the squad, and McConnell and Pilling, Nioni, Ngamoa, and Renell Young, and Cornell Misker. I'd loan out these 6 and Kone Doherty, Morrison, Nalo, Figueroa, Kelly, Mabia, and I would keep Davidson, Laffy, Jonas, and Pennington at under 21 level. This has been a very long video, and that's going to be all it is for me. If you liked the video, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Twitter. And as always, thanks for watching.